Good morning. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you, both live and later, maybe evening or afternoon, whenever you may be joining this message. And always want to give my great thanks to Victor for having me. He has left the room. But he's with us in the spirit, and Rochelle and Eric and Rob and everybody who makes this Sangha what it is, and each of you that I've been getting to know. Thank you for welcoming me into this Sangha, and I'm just always very grateful for the richness of this community. So this morning I would like to talk about contrastive rhetoric in the German and English essay form in the early 20th century. Just kidding. Thanksgiving is coming up this Thursday. You know what I have to talk about. I have to talk about gratitude. And I'm happy to be of service this morning. You're welcome. I know a lot of you are like, I feel really glad that that's not actually what I'm here to listen to this morning. But if you got excited about that, and I think Rochelle did, maybe we should talk later. We may have some things in common. But truly, I do want to talk about the grace of gratitude in all seriousness. I want to talk about it kind of honestly here at the beginning. Thanksgiving, even in the before pandemic times, the before times, often was a mixed experience. Yes, there some of us just love the holiday and everything about it, but for a lot of us, it also carries a lot of stress. It's like if we're in charge of preparing food or hosting, or maybe we just have a particular family relationship or dynamic that's not so enjoyable, or we just don't want to listen to Aunt Mildred talk about her doily collection for another hour. So, insert your variation of that particular holiday stress right there. And then we add 2020. I'm not even going to narrow it to COVID. I'm just going to say 2020. We add everything on top of that. And the great paradox of this is that no matter how stressful Thanksgiving was for us in the before times, as we're facing this dilemma of whether or not to gather in person with our families, we're like, I don't care how stressful it was. That was normal stress. I want that stress back. And in this clinging to this old version of reality, we're often creating even more anxiety for ourselves. And so I'll briefly share my own Thanksgiving anxiety journey this year, and just in the hopes that there is some resonance with you and you can relate to this. A few weeks ago, started reading about the numbers, just not even creeping, like shooting up. And as I would imagine being in a room without masks for hours with extended family whom I haven't been in a bubble or a pod with, and I didn't necessarily know what they've been up to, I started to feel that sort of, wiggly, nervous, anxious energy coming up through my body. And I thought, what am I going to do about this? And I thought, well, I could call Mom. My parents are hosting Thanksgiving, and say, I don't feel good about this. I think maybe we shouldn't get together in person. And I would think about doing that and imagine that phone call, and I would get that same wiggly, icky, anxious feeling that would make me want to go organize or clean something instead. And this started a little kind of ping pong match. I don't want to be the Grinch that canceled Thanksgiving, but I also don't want to be putting myself and my family at risk for infection or worrying about it the entire time I'm trying to eat dinner about, are we getting sick right now? Are we all getting infected right now? And so it was a no-win situation, just to let that go, perpetually. So I decided that the lesser of the two difficulties was to call my mom. And surprise, She was watching the same tennis match with her anxiety. She was worried about having it in person. She was worried about making the phone calls and being the bad guy in the family that canceled Thanksgiving. But she also decided that that was the right thing to do. And so we canceled in-person gathering. And, it turns out that the family really was relieved. We were all experiencing some level of this. And so in the midst of this sort of mounting anxiety or overwhelm, it can be really difficult and tricky to feel gratitude. Because another thing that happens if we intentionally try to cultivate gratitude in the midst, really even in the best times, but especially when there's such an escalation of suffering that we are witnessing around us or even experiencing ourselves, there can be something that I call gratitude guilt that comes up, which is this sense that if I'm feeling happy and grateful that I have a job or I have good housing or that my family is healthy, that somehow I am dismissing or ignoring or not acknowledging the experience of those who don't. And so then we feel guilty and so we say, it's not appropriate. Maybe it's not right to feel gratitude or to count our blessings right now. And that's actually, I think, a little bit of a slippery slope. And in fact, it's not. It's actually an unrealistic view of things. And it tends to stem from something, or I would suggest that it stems from this very well documented, well observed phenomenon that we as human beings are gifted with, and that is something called the negativity bias. And you know how common it is when there's a name for it, right? So I like to think of negativity bias. Well, first of all, what is it? Well, it's this mental habit or way of processing our days in which if we have 10 good things happen and one bad thing happen, the thing we're going to tell our friends and family about is the bad thing. The thing we're going to think about when we're laying there in bed at night is the one bad thing. The thing that we're going to remember 10 days later is the one bad thing. So that's negativity bias. And the way I like to think of negativity bias is it's sort of like, imagine that I went through my entire life with my head kind of tilted to the side. And it's real easy for me to look down at the negative. It's a little harder for me to look up. And I definitely have a very skewed, specific perspective of the world from this way. So all of a sudden, if somebody comes along and says, have you tried counting your blessings? Have you tried counterbalancing this negativity bias and coming to this more centered and balanced view? If I've been like this my whole life, it's going to feel awkward, difficult, strange maybe. But in fact, it is the more balanced and complete view because I can take in the difficulty, the suffering, the bad, the ugly over here. And I can also take in the complete view of the good, the beautiful, the joyous over here. So it doesn't have to be either or, it can be yes and. It's all there. And that's part of the beauty and the comfort of a mindfulness practice is that it helps us have more complete experience moment by moment so that we're not dismissing one side or the other or anything in between. And so when we feel that gratitude guilt coming up, it's important to be aware that it may be really coming from this negativity bias. And in fact, even if it feels awkward to intentionally find things to be grateful for, that's actually bringing us into a more realistic relationship with what we're experiencing in the world. And I think it's also very interesting that the words grace and gratitude come from the same root. So I kind of got into my word nerdery at the beginning when I made that joke about contrastive rhetoric, but here's the real word nerdery here. These both come from a Latin word, gratus, Gratus. And it's an adjective, which I also think is interesting that we've turned grace and gratitude into things, into nouns, like we could hold them or touch them. But this Latin word gratus actually has 3 different senses. And one is a sense of something being pleasing or agreeable. Another sense is of something being cherished or loved. And the final sense is the one that we think of, which is being thankful, having a quality of gratitude or thankfulness. And I think it's interesting to take all 3 of those meanings together and realize that it sort of encompasses this idea of both being pleased, right, being thankful, but also being pleasing in the world, right? And so this is the grace of gratitude, in that, if we're going around like this with that negativity bias, we're perhaps not moving through the world as gracefully as we could. But when we come into this more centered place, when we experience all the senses of gratus, right, of both feeling grateful, feeling pleased, and being a source of gratitude and thankfulness in the world around us, there's just more grace. And, the Buddha had a lot to say about this. And I want to give a quote for those of you who are sutta scholars out there and are interested in this. This is from the Anguttara Nikaya, if you want to look it up. But the Buddha talked about gratitude in terms of rare people. He said, these 2 people are hard to find in the world. Which 2? The one who is first to do a kindness, and the one who is grateful and thankful for the kindness done. So I'm going to read that again to really let that soak in. These 2 people are hard to find in the world. Which 2? The one who is first to do a kindness, and the one who is grateful and thankful for a kindness done. And this may seem sort of grand and like this big concept that's sort of abstract. So I'd like to give you a really concrete example of how you've probably experienced this sort of graceful dance of gratitude in your own life. And think about the last time you were entering a public building or building where lots of people come and go from, and you opened the door for someone. You were the first to do a kindness. And what do we get from opening a door? Unless you're a professional doorman, nobody's paying you to do this. It's just something that seems like a nice thing to do for another human being. And when that person that we open the door for walks through, smile at us, say thank you. And they give us that little nod, that little connection. It's like this very small, subtle dance of offering a kindness and receiving it with gratitude. Now we all know there's been that moment when you've opened the door and that person has walked through, head down, like you're not even there, never said thank you, and perhaps you've managed to restrain yourself. I'm not going to name any names for those of us who haven't always restrained ourselves, and you've been tempted to say, "You're welcome," after them. But ideally, the first example where there's this mutual connection has happened more often than not. And so I think that really is the grace of gratitude. It can be, if you've ever wanted to be a rare creature, right? Gratitude practice, this may be your chance at becoming a unicorn. Becoming this rare creature who both offers kindness and receives it openly. Another just brief example of kind of approaching the difficulties of life with this sense of grace came from several months ago. My grandmother, who is now 95 and deals with the challenges of just, day-to-day process of aging. And she told me, she said, I woke up this morning and, oh man, this arm really hurt. And then I thought, I should just be grateful that the other one doesn't hurt too. And so that's really all we're looking for. So it doesn't have to be perfect. This arm may hurt. But can we acknowledge that this one doesn't and also take that in? So I just want to invite you to do that today. Maybe just right now. I'm just looking around here and I'm thinking, I'm in a building that has heat, that has electricity. I'm in a body that is breathing right now. I'm very blessed to have my visual faculties. I can hear, even though I do have hearing loss. Some of you may not know, I wear hearing aids. But I can be grateful for these magic, tiny machines that I can plug into my ears that allow me to hear all of you and to interact with you. So just take a moment now. Maybe look around. It doesn't have to be we don't have to be meditation robots to find things to be grateful for. So I invite you to do that now. Just take a moment. What is there, even the tiniest thing, to be grateful for? And that's it. The grace of gratitude is as simple as that. Now, of course, beware the gratitude guilt. Maybe when you tried to do that, you thought, oh, this feels so fake. So I don't want to be Pollyanna. But remember that negativity bias coming back into center. It may feel awkward to intentionally find things to be thankful for. We may hear that voice of guilt coming up when we acknowledge that there is also so much suffering. But us adding to that suffering through guilt and anxiety and overwhelm doesn't help resolve it. Us bringing ourselves back into the center and this more graceful way of being, that will help us reduce suffering in the world. And so in this way, gratitude is an antidote to anxiety and overwhelm that we might be feeling as we move into the holiday season, or just as we cope with life day to day in general. So this holiday season, I am wishing you many, many moments of thanksgiving and safety and wholeness, however your holiday season takes shape.